Last night, the Commons gave an election the go-ahead. Tonight, I'll be speaking to the woman who says she'll be our next Prime Minister, Liberal Democrat leader Jo Swinson. I'm joined now by the Liberal Democrat leader, Jo Swinson. Welcome.
Good to be with you, Andrew.
You've been instrumental in making this election happen, so why have you risked going down in the history books as the party leader that paved the way for Boris Johnson to win an overall majority, deliver his Brexit and govern for the next 5 years?
Well, the Liberal Democrats want to stop Brexit, as you know, and we have long said that we felt the best way to do that was through a people's vote. But the situation that we found ourselves in over the last week to 10 days was one where Boris Johnson had got a deal with the European Union. He had secured a second reading for that bill in Parliament, helped by 19 Labour MPs. And the prospect of getting a majority in Parliament for a people's vote felt more distant rather than closer. And so the best way to stop Brexit became a general election.
But you've given a Tory Prime Minister the Christmas present he craved.
Well, nothing is certain about this election.
Oh, no, I'm not saying
election.
that, but this is what he wanted. I mean, Tony Blair, he's every bit as much a Remainer as you. He wants to reject it. He says a general election is, quote, an act of extraordinary stupidity. It will pave the way for a Tory Brexit. Now, that's not certain, but there's a good chance he's right.
Well, it's certainly a risk, but so would continuing have been. And I feel the risk would have been that Boris Johnson would have got his Brexit deal bill through with the help of Labour MPs. And the other thing that we needed to bear in mind was that until Monday of this week, we didn't have the extension to Article 50. And indeed, from conversations with fellow EU counterparts, there was a lot of resistance and reluctance.
Particularly from Paris.
Particularly the French. And indeed, the intervention that myself with the SNP made at the weekend gave them the confidence that they needed to offer that extension and prevent us crashing out without a deal on Thursday, tomorrow, which otherwise could have been the case.
But why did you give up so easily on a second referendum in this Parliament?
I don't agree with that characterisation. We have tabled amendments 17 times for a people's vote.
But there hasn't been a vote on a second referendum for 6 months.
Well, there would have been within the last 10 days if the Labour Party had backed our amendment, because with their support it would have been selected by the Speaker and put to a vote. But that's just the latest example of where Labour haven't backed it. Well, certainly, as I say, Labour haven't been backing it wholeheartedly. 19 Labour MPs voted for the deal. And also it's the case that those Conservative rebels, some of whom had been moving towards the people's vote, had definitely become cooler on the idea since Boris Johnson got his deal with the EU. Well,
look, we are where we are. Do you accept if the Conservatives win a majority in this election that they will have a mandate for their Brexit deal?
I accept if they win a majority that they will push through their Brexit deal. I'll still argue and believe that it's a bad Brexit deal, but I entirely expect that they will take that as a mandate to push that forward. And
no,
of course,
but
in that
you
scenario,
accept that it will be a mandate?
They would have the votes to push it through Parliament, wouldn't they?
So if Boris Johnson wins this election, and at the moment he's favourite, but we know many things can change, but at the moment he is, you'll accept it's game over, that Brexit is happening, and you'll call off the campaign for another referendum?
I'm not going to call off campaigning for what I believe in. And in the same way that when I was first elected in 2005 and Tony Blair had a large majority, I didn't stop campaigning for Liberal Democrat policies and ideas and the things that I believe in. But clearly, if Boris Johnson wins a majority, he will have the votes to deliver his Brexit deal. I'll still keep campaigning for the things that I believe in and that people will vote for me to do.
But you've said, in the unlikely event that you were to win an overall majority, that you would have the mandate to revoke Article 50 and just cancel Brexit. So it surely must follow
and in that scenario,
if he wins,
I would have the votes in Parliament to support that position.
So it surely must follow if he wins, he has a mandate to carry out Brexit.
And if I win a
I just want you to confirm that.
No, this is an important point, because if I win a Liberal Democrat majority government and I'm Prime Minister and I revoke Article 50, I don't anticipate that people that think that Brexit's a good idea will suddenly agree that revoking Article 50 is a good idea.
I'm not asking you to change your mind. I'm just asking you that if he gets an overall majority in this election, he has the mandate to take us out on his terms.
Well, he'll do that. I'll keep arguing and campaigning to
Why are you so
keep us
reluctant to
in.
say he has the mandate?
Well, I mean, he would.
He
Would
would.
do it, right? But he
Okay.
would. But I would campaign still for the things I believe in.
I understand that. And speaking of you forming the next government, here's one of your leaflets. Here, I'll just show it up for the camera to see it. It says, Jo Swinson, Britain's next Prime Minister. When did you indulge in fantasy politics?
I'm standing as a candidate to be Prime Minister, Andrew.
No one stands as a candidate to be Prime Minister. You're standing as a candidate in Easton Barton.
I'm standing as the leader of the Liberal Democrats, and you're right, we have a parliamentary democracy system, and the leader of the party who secures the most MPs or a majority of MPs becomes Prime Minister.
Believe it or not, I do know how it
Indeed,
works.
so
And
that
our
is the
viewers
sense
know
in which
how
I'm a
it
candidate
works.
to be Prime Minister.
But you know, I know, our viewers know, you're not going to be the next Prime Minister.
Well, hang on a second, Andrew. We're about to have a general election where millions of people out there are going to cast their votes.
We know that.
And exactly. And it's not up to you to tell them what they can and can't choose.
No, you can't play. I'm not telling them.
Yeah.
I'm not telling them. I'm saying that from everything we know about politics, our viewers, you as well, every commentator knows you're not the next Prime Minister, and it's unrealistic for you to say so.
I cannot disagree with you more on this, Andrew. Right? We are in a very volatile political situation. Plenty of people said they didn't think Jeremy Corbyn would become leader of the Labour Party. Plenty of people said they didn't think Donald Trump would ever become president of the United States. Plenty of people said that they didn't think that Brexit would ever happen. We have seen many unprecedented political results in recent years.
So would you rule out global domination?
I'm standing.
I mean, you've probably as good a chance of that as being Prime Minister.
I disagree. Look, Liberal Democrats, let's face it, Liberal Democrats beat both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party in a national
European elections
for the first time in 100 years.
Nigel Farage's party came first in the European elections. He's not going to win this election, is he?
Well, I hope he won't.
Right.
He'll be standing in the election, clearly.
OK, look, that's what you say. And politicians who want to be our Prime Minister should know what they're talking about. So I just want to show you this, what you told Parliament last week about the official Treasury assessment on Brexit. Let's watch this.
The government's own assessment in November 2018 looked at the impact of a free trade agreement arrangement on the British economy and concluded that that would mean that our economy would shrink by more than 6%, an amount which is greater than the way the economy shrank during the financial crash.
So you're saying there that even with a free trade deal, Brexit would mean our economy shrinking by over 6%. And you pointed out there that was bigger than the contraction in the great crash of 2008. But the Treasury didn't say that, did it?
The 2018, well, first of all, I want them to publish an economic impact assessment
No, that's a
about this
different matter.
Brexit.
This has already been published.
So I'm having
you
to
were
go.
quoting the November 2018 Treasury assessment.
So I'm having to go.
It didn't
on,
say that, did it?
Well, that was what the average free trade agreement scenario was going to be.
It didn't say the economy would contract by 6%, as you said there. What the Treasury assessment said, that in 15 years' time, 15 years' time, the economy would be 6% smaller with a free trade deal than if we stayed in.
Yes.
6% smaller, not a 6% contraction. The economy would still grow by a lot, but not by as much if we stayed in. That's not a contraction.
In real terms, it absolutely would be, because that's
No, it
compared.
wouldn't.
Yes, it would.
Look, in 2008,
It would, because
in 2008, the British economy contracted by 6%. In other words, it was 6% smaller in 1 year.
Absolutely accept it was in a different time frame.
Whereas what the Treasury is saying here is we'll continue to grow over the next 15 years, but not as fast. That's not a contraction.
Not at the pace to keep pace with people's standard of living and the rising prices.
But it's not a contraction.
It's a hit to the economy. It's a hit to the economy and where the economy would be.
So would you like to correct it tonight to say that you didn't mean a 6% contraction, it was a slower growth than we would get if we stayed in.
That our economy, yes, would be more than 6% smaller, 6.4%, I think is the figure that was in that report.
Over 15 years.
Over 15 years. And I would love to see what that was over 5, but they didn't produce the numbers for what would happen. In fact, we don't know if it, in fact, would have been a much greater hit in the early years of that and then some mild recovery, because they haven't published those figures, Andrew. And I think the question we need to ask is why they haven't published...
What you told the Commons for an aspiring Prime Minister was misleading.
I think the essence is pretty spot on, but I absolutely think the question is, why are they not publishing those economic impact assessments? And it is because they know it will be damning.
That's not what I was asking you, but never mind. I think we've kind of clarified that. Will the Lib Dems contemplate doing deals with other parties at a constituency level in this election to concentrate Remain votes around one candidate?
We are in discussions with Plaid Cymru and the Green Party in an organisation called Unite to Remain, where we have been having discussions about arrangements similar to what we did in the Brecon and Radnorshire by-election.
Which you won because the Welsh Nationalists,
Plaid Cymru
and I think the Greens too, they stood back.
They stood back to stand alongside us, if you like, to say we want to elect a candidate that will be pro-Remain. So we're in discussions.
What about the Scottish Nationalists? Are you discussing with them?
They're not involved in these discussions.
Why not?
Well, clearly we agree on some elements such as stopping Brexit, but as you will well know from Scottish politics, that's not the only big and controversial constitutional issue in Scotland. And I think it's important that people have the choice to vote not only on what their preference is on Brexit, but also their views on whether Scotland remains part of the UK or not. And that is also a very important issue to many people in Scotland.
But the Welsh Nationalists are now in favour of independence for Wales, just as the Scottish Nationals are in favour of independence for Scotland. So why deal with one and not the other?
Well, look, the Plaid Cymru and ourselves have managed to have very cordial arrangements and discussions that are progressing well. There hasn't been the appetite in Scotland, I think, for the reasons that I set out, and you know, it is a different political
What
environment.
about Uxbridge, the Prime Minister's seat here in London? Labour's challenging strongly. It's got a strong Remain candidate there. Mr Johnson's majority is only 5,000. You came a pretty poor third in 2017. Why not stand aside and help defeat Mr Johnson?
Well, I think the problem with that is in the premise of your question that Labour has a strong Remain candidate.
Well,
because, well, the Labour Party is not a Remain party. I mean, you can ask Jeremy Corbyn this time and again.
I didn't say that. I said the candidate was Remain. Was strongly Remain.
Except candidates take their party whip, and the Labour manifesto, we haven't seen it yet, but it looks like their policy is going to be to negotiate a Brexit deal because they want to deliver Brexit. And they say that
push it to a second referendum.
And they say this time and time again, they want to deliver Brexit. They won't even say firmly which way they will campaign. So we cannot trust that Labour is in fact any kind of Remain party. They've proven time and again they're not.
If Labour ends up the largest party, but without an overall majority, is there any arrangement that you could come to with Labour to allow it to form a government?
I've been really clear. Jeremy Corbyn is not going to be put into number 10 on the back of Liberal Democrat votes, nor is Boris Johnson. Both of them want Brexit to happen. Neither of them are fit to be Prime Minister.
So how do you get a second referendum without a Labour government?
We have Liberal Democrat MPs elected because we're about to go into a general election where millions of people get the chance to choose.
In the highly unlikely event, given because you've obviously convinced me that you're not the next Prime Minister, how do you get a second referendum without a Labour government?
Look, in this election, people have a clear choice. The Liberal Democrats are standing to stop Brexit.
No, we know they have a clear choice, but if Labour ends up the largest party, but without an overall majority, but you won't help it form a government, you don't get a second referendum.
We will vote for a second referendum, but we're not going to put Jeremy Corbyn into number 10. He's not fit to do the job, and he wants to deliver Brexit.
So you don't get a second referendum then?
Well, he wants to deliver Brexit, right? He's a Brexiteer.
He's also promised a second referendum, and unless you help him get into power, you certainly ain't going to get one with the Tories. So unless you help Mr Corbyn into power, you don't get one with Labour either.
Jeremy Corbyn is a Brexiteer, but that's not the only problem with Jeremy Corbyn. This is also a man who has allowed things to be done in his name and his party where there have been serious complaints about anti-Semitism, and he has refuse to take the action necessary to deal with that. Now,
So-
that is a fundamental problem
So that's
in terms
why
of
you
his
won't,
values.
that and other reasons why you won't deal with them, even at the cost of not getting a second referendum.
We will always campaign for a second referendum. We will always vote to have a people's vote if we're unable to secure a Liberal Democrat majority to revoke Article 50
All right.
outright. And we'll continue to do that in the next Parliament, but we're going to have many, many more Liberal Democrat MPs because we know that we're competitive in
All right.
hundreds of seats around
Okay.
the country.
Jo Swinson, thanks for being with us tonight. I hope we get a chance to speak again as the campaign develops.